Long before Baltimore's skyline touched the clouds, an ancient and shadowed world pulsed beneath the land we now know. It was here, in the quiet expanse of the mid-Atlantic, that the first traces of human life took root, as early as the 10th millennium BC. These were the Paleo-Indians, mysterious nomads who wandered through what would one day become a city of steel and steam. Their presence still lingers in the soil, in the stones, in the rare artifacts unearthed in places like Herring Run Park. In 2021, a stunning discovery there revealed tools and relics buried for 5,000 to 9,000 years, casting eerie light on a Baltimore that existed long before European maps or colonial ambitions. These were the echoes of the woodland period, a time when the land was thick with ritual and survival, when tribes of the Potomac Creek culture moved silently through forests and riverbanks stretching from Baltimore down to Virginia's Rappahannock River. By the early 17th century, the silence was shifting. To the north, the powerful Susquehannock tribe, fierce and Iroquoian-speaking, dominated the Chesapeake's upper tributaries. They did not trust the Powhatan Confederacy further south, and neither did the Piscataway, who remained distant, retreating to the northern banks of the Potomac River. The land that would become Baltimore was a boundary, a no-man's land between two powers, untouched by major settlements, but marked by quiet tension and wary passage. Then, in 1634, the storm arrived. European colonists, carried by the merchant ship the Ark, made landfall on St. Clement's Island, launching the official colonization of Maryland. The newcomers didn't stop at the Potomac. They moved northward, drawing invisible lines across the land. They named streets after royalty, King, Queen, Caroline, an eerie foreshadowing of the crown's hold over life and death in the colonies. Baltimore's first county seat, known only as Old Baltimore, rose on the banks of Bush River, where military tests now thunder at Aberdeen Proving Ground. Back then, it was a fragile outpost surrounded by tension, disease, and the ever-diminishing presence of the Susquehannock. Word came in bursts. But the greater enemy wasn't muskets. It was smallpox, carried in the breath and blood of settlers, reducing native populations in silence. In 1661, a man named David Jones staked a claim along the eastern bank of the Jones Falls, a spot now remembered as Jonestown. But few recall the truth that preceded his arrival. Few remember the ancient cultures buried beneath Baltimore's foundations. Fewer still realize that the city was built on forgotten footsteps, lost names, and silent wars. Baltimore history, echoes of revolution and shadows of empire. As the 18th century dawned, a quiet transformation stirred along the banks of the Patapsco River. In 1706, the Maryland General Assembly made a strategic move, establishing the port of Baltimore at Whetstone Point, now known as Locust Point. Tobacco flowed from this shore like lifeblood, destined for distant markets. But no one yet imagined what this tiny trade post would one day become. Then, on August 8, 1729, an act was signed that changed everything. A new town, Baltimore, was authorized on the north side of the Patapsco. By 1730, surveyors carved its future into the landscape, etching streets into wilderness. Yet by 1752, the town was little more than a whisper, just 27 homes, a church, and 2 taverns. But it was growing, and not alone. Jonestown and Fells Point, rising to the east, joined it like scattered stars beginning to form a constellation. By 1768, the 3 settlements fused into a single commercial force. A courthouse was built, a square emerged, and the city's heart began to beat. But behind that heartbeat were darker rhythms. In 1765, the first printing press arrived, ushering in newspapers, voices, and resistance. And in the shadow of Lexington Market, founded in 1782, human lives were sold. Baltimore's economy flourished, yes, but it was fed by sugar, by tobacco, by labor extracted in chains. Slavery was not hidden here. It stood in plain sight, advertised in the Baltimore Sun, conducted in bustling streets where markets met mansions. Still, revolution came. In 1774, Baltimore launched the first post office system in what would become the United States. And as the Revolutionary War gripped the colonies, the city became a flame of defiance. Merchants boycotted British goods. Citizens resisted. And in the bitter winter of 1776 to 1777, the Second Continental Congress met in Baltimore, hidden in the McHenry Fight House. For 2 fleeting months, Baltimore was the capital of a country still being born. By 1796, Baltimore, Jonestown, and Fells Point merged into the incorporated city of Baltimore. A new century loomed. Baltimore history, from Anthem to anarchy. In the 19th century, Baltimore was still bound to Baltimore County, but it was already stepping into its own identity. In 1814, British ships filled the harbor with smoke and fire, but Baltimore did not fall. Instead, as bombs exploded above Fort McHenry, a young lawyer named Francis Scott Key penned the words that would become the Star-Spangled Banner. A monument soon rose from the ashes of that attack, and with it, a nickname was born, the Monumental City. Gaslight illuminated its streets in 1816, and by 1820, Baltimore's population had soared to 60,000. Gone were the days of tobacco alone. Sawmills, shipyards, and textile mills now spun the city into an industrial machine. The National Road and the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad pulled the city westward, linking it to the American heartland. Prosperity expanded, but so did unrest. In 1835, financial collapse sparked the Baltimore Bank Riot, a days-long upheaval that earned the city a darker title, Mobtown. Yet innovation surged forward. The first dental college in the world was founded here in 1840. By 1844, wires crackled with the first telegraph message, sent from Baltimore to Washington. What hath God wrought? But shadows deepened as the Civil War approached. Though Maryland remained with the Union, tensions ran high. In February 1861, a secret plot to assassinate President-elect Abraham Lincoln in Baltimore was narrowly foiled. He passed through the city in disguise, slipping past the danger unseen. Just 2 months later, the streets erupted. In the Pratt Street riot, secessionist mobs clashed with Union troops, one of the Civil War's first deadly encounters. By 1861, Union forces occupied the city, ensuring Maryland would not fall into Confederate hands. Baltimore sat uncomfortably between loyalty and rebellion, a Union city with Confederate sympathies smoldering just beneath the surface. Then came the Panic of 1873. With it arrived wage cuts, fury, and blood. In 1877, striking railroad workers clashed with the National Guard. Gunfire echoed through the city, leaving 10 dead and 25 wounded. The Industrial Revolution had promised progress, but at a price. Still, a flicker of hope emerged in 1893 when Reverend Edward A. Lawrence launched Baltimore's first settlement house. From the ashes of unrest, a movement for compassion was born. Baltimore's past is layered in contradiction, progress and pain, revolution and repression, invention and injustice. What we see today is only the surface. Beneath it lies a city haunted by struggle, ignited by resistance, and shaped by the shadows of its own making. Baltimore history, fire, division, and the battle for identity. On a frigid February morning in 1904, a flicker turned into fury. The Great Baltimore Fire swept through the heart of the city, devouring more than 1,500 buildings in just 30 hours. The flames raged across 70 city blocks, leaving behind twisted steel, scorched stone, and ash-choked streets. It was a disaster, but also a turning point. As Baltimore rose from the ruins, it rewrote the book on firefighting. The fire may have ended in smoke, but its lessons reshaped American cities for decades to come. Yet not all of Baltimore's fires were visible. In 1910, an ordinance was quietly signed into law, a law that legally segregated neighborhoods based on race. It was the first of its kind in the United States. Baltimore lawyer Milton Dashiell had proposed a chilling blueprint: white blocks for white families, black blocks for black families by law. Though struck down by the Supreme Court in 1917, the legacy of that ordinance echoed through generations, and other cities copied Baltimore's lead before the ruling fell like a gavel in the dark. The city sprawled outward during the early 20th century, annexing land from surrounding counties, stretching its arms wider. But in 1948, that expansion was halted. A constitutional amendment forced annexation to a public vote, effectively locking Baltimore's borders forever. Meanwhile, streetcars connected the past to the future, bringing commuters from new neighborhoods like Edmondson Village, where change arrived faster than anyone imagined. By 1950, the city's black population stood at just under a quarter. But the patterns were shifting. Blockbusting, panic selling, and white flight turned once integrated streets into fast segregated spaces. By 1970, nearly half the city's population was black. The divide was no longer only legal, it was social, economic, and nearly complete. Then, the sky cracked again. On April 4, 1968, the bullet that killed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. set fire to Baltimore's soul. Riots erupted. National Guard and federal troops flooded the city, 12,000 strong. For 8 days, Baltimore burned once more. Not from wood and brick this time, but from centuries of tension and unhealed wounds. The cost? Over $10 million, and something far less tangible: trust. By the 1970s, the city's heartbeat had slowed. Downtown Baltimore had become a graveyard of abandoned warehouses and crumbling docks. But then came a strange new nickname, Charm City, invented by advertisers in 1975. It was less a description than a plea. Yet the charm began to return. Slowly, the Maryland Science Center opened in 1976, followed by the World Trade Center and the Baltimore Convention Center. In 1980, Harbor Place opened, a glimmer of energy on a tired waterfront. The National Aquarium, now Maryland's most visited attraction, followed in 1981, casting its glassy eye over a city still learning how to breathe again. Cultural life pushed through the cracks. The American Visionary Art Museum opened its doors in 1995, and Movable Feast, a local charity born from the HIV/AIDS crisis, fed those left behind. At the same time, sports returned downtown. The Orioles moved into Camden Yards in 1992, a cathedral to baseball. Pope John Paul II gave Mass there in 1995. And by 1998, the Baltimore Ravens roared into M&T Bank Stadium, next door. But violence had never truly left the city. In 1993, homicides reached a historic peak. In 2015, it happened again. That year, Freddie Gray, a young black man, died in police custody. The streets erupted once more: protests, pain, fire. The National Guard was deployed. The world watched as Baltimore's long battle with justice and inequality exploded into the headlines. What had never truly healed had again torn open. Baltimore history, shadows of the present, echoes of the past. As the new millennium unfolded, Baltimore began to stir once more, not from revolution or ruin, but from reinvention. In 2004, the curtain rose again on the Hippodrome Theater, its stage reborn after decades of silence. A year later, the Reginald F. Lewis Museum opened its doors, unveiling stories long buried, testimonies of African American strength and struggle woven into the city's core. In 2012, another chapter unfolded with the founding of the National Slavic Museum, honoring the immigrant voices that helped shape this diverse, haunted city. That same year, a towering new structure rose at the heart of East Baltimore. Johns Hopkins Hospital unveiled one of the most advanced medical facilities in the nation. The Sheikh Zayed Tower and Charlotte R. Bloomberg Children's Center stood as monuments to healing, funded by global philanthropy from the United Arab Emirates and Michael Bloomberg. Beneath the steel and glass, one truth remained. Baltimore has always been a city of paradox, where medicine grows beside poverty and innovation rises alongside old wounds. But progress came with ambitions far larger than medicine. In 2016, the City Council approved a $660 million bond deal for the Port Covington redevelopment, a project spearheaded by Under Armour founder Kevin Plank. Backed by Goldman Sachs and estimated at $5.5 billion, Port Covington became the most expansive redevelopment in the city's history. Warehouses became waterfront visions. Empty lots promised life, jobs, housing, a new skyline. It all beckoned from the harbor's edge. And yet, even amid transformation, tragedy returned. In the quiet darkness of March 26, 2024, a container ship veered off course and struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge, sending it crashing into the cold waters of the Patapsco River. The collapse echoed far beyond Baltimore's shores. 8 construction workers plunged into the depths. Only 2 were rescued. 6 were lost and only recovered after weeks of searching. The bridge that bore the name of the man who wrote the national anthem had fallen, not to fire or protest, but to steel, speed, and silence. Its reconstruction is expected to cost nearly $2 billion, with completion not projected until 2028. Until then, the city waits and remembers. Baltimore history is not a neat chronology. It is a living labyrinth, filled with rebirth and resistance, culture and collapse, dreams deferred and dreams rebuilt. In every street, every harbor breeze, every echo of a crumbling brick or towering crane, Baltimore whispers, "You must not forget." If you found this journey through Baltimore's layered and mysterious past compelling, subscribe to History Love for more in-depth explorations of the cities, moments, and people that shaped the world. Don't forget to like, comment, and share, because history lives when we tell it. This is History Love, and this was the untold story of Baltimore.